Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond. My name is Frank Corsoro, and it is my privilege to be a new incoming member of your Board of Trustees for the 2023-24 church year. First UU is a community of many faith journeys and beliefs united in a single covenant of care. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We uphold the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion in all human relationships and institutions. My wife Linda and I, although not new to Unitarian Universalism, are still relatively new to First UU. But we have witnessed firsthand the radical hospitality that is a hallmark of this congregation. So whether you are here with us today in person or joining us online, know too that you too are important to us and are welcome in this sacred space. Please enjoy today's service, and I hope to see you afterward.
Bonjour. Bienvenue. I just got back from Montreal. And they are very welcoming there, and they say they're sorry for all the smoke they're sending us. So I can tell you that it's really nice to get away. I hope some of you have gotten away this summer or are going to get away, but I can also tell you it's really nice to come back home and to see all of your welcoming faces here. So today we welcome Jeffrey Clark, who's going to be our worship associate, and Jamie Kilpatrick, who's going to offer us some special kind of music. And welcome to all of you at home and all of you here today. So, do we have any visitors here for the first or second time who would like to introduce themselves? Great, we have a mic coming around.
Hi, I'm a microphone.
Hi, I'm Susie. I'm returning to Richmond after a long hiatus. I just moved here this week, and so recently that my truck hasn't gotten here yet. Just me and my cat. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm coming from Fayetteville, North Carolina, where the UU congregation is about 8 people on any given Sunday. So this is like exciting to see a big crowd.
Welcome. So glad you're here.
Good morning, I'm Dennis Shaw. I'm from Port Charlotte, Florida. I've been a UU for 47 years, and my daughter lives here, so I'll be back.
Great. Welcome, Dennis.
Hi, I'm Jen. I just moved here from Louisa County, and I am new to Unitarianism.
Welcome. Okay, I think that's it. Great. This is a time for us to be together. Why don't you take a minute to say hello to who's around you?
Good morning, everybody. All of the music today is going to be interactive. So here during the prelude, if you want to hum, if you want to like tap yourself to the beat, if you pick up the words and you want to sing it with me, please do. Just do anything centering for you. part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give.
Let us open our hearts to the spiritual practice of listening. The Dalai Lama says, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may hear something new. Come, let us worship while listening to each other's hearts.
Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us, deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose, to help him or her to empty their heart. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing our opening hymn, When the Heart is in a Holy Place.
Good morning. My name's Dee DeRoche, and I am a member of our Share the Plate Committee. This month, the chosen recipient is Virginia Supportive Housing. VSH's vision is a Virginia in which homelessness does not exist. Initiated in 1988, this 501(c) operates with the approach of housing first, which prioritizes access to housing without restrictions such as sobriety or minimum income requirements. The organization develops and maintains properties and offers supportive services to their residents. Today, VSH provides permanent supportive housing to over 1,000 individuals living in the catchment area in their properties in Richmond, Southampton Roads, and Charlottesville. Over 9 rental properties also are scattered throughout the Richmond area. In 2022, VSH served 500 individuals in the Richmond region. 98% of these individuals did not return to homelessness. VSH is expanding their impact through the construction of Cool Lane Commons in Henrico County, which provides 80 units of affordable housing. Construction should be completed by the end of this year. If you are interested in touring this supportive housing facility, please look for the sign-up sheet in the hall. There's a tour scheduled for this Friday, the 28th at 10 a.m. The offering will now be taken. Please give generously.
Thank you, Dee. There are a number of ways that you can give. They're on the screens, both here in the hall and at home. We hope that you will give generously. You can provide a check. There's a website you can go to. There's an app you can use, or you can give right now in person. So if the ushers will come forward, we'll take the offering, and thank you very much for your generosity.
We'll start our time of meditation prayer with a pastoral prayer by Gary Kalowski called Listening to Our Hearts. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all. Maybe it just means listening. Unplugging the TV, turning off the computer, quieting the mental chatter and the distractions. Maybe it means listening to the birds and the insects, the wind and the leaves and the creaking and groaning of the trees, noticing who else is out there, not far away, but nearby, sitting so still we can hear our breathing. We can hear our heartbeat, watch our breath, the gentle whoosh of air, the funny noises from our insides, marveling at the body we take so much for granted. Maybe it means listening to our own hearts. paying more attention to what we really want from life, and less attention to all the nagging, scolding voices from our past. Or maybe it's all about listening to each other, not thinking ahead to how we can answer or rebut or parry or advise or admonish, but actually being present to each other. Perhaps if we just sit quietly, we'll overhear a peace whispering through the centuries, maybe missing from the clamor of this moment. Maybe prayer means listening to the silences between the words, noticing the negativity of space, the vast, undifferentiated, and nameless wonder that underlies it all. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all, but listening with the heart to all those around us and what is within us. Those who have ears, let them hear. Amen. So let's just take a minute of quiet to listen to our own hearts.
Here's a reading called Just Listen by Rachel Naomi Remen. I suspect that the most basic and powerful way to connect to another person is to listen. Just listen. Perhaps the most important thing we ever give each other is our attention, and especially if it's given from the heart. When people are talking, there's no need to do anything but receive them. Just take them in. Listen to what they're saying. Care about it. Most times, caring about it is even more important than understanding it. Most of us don't value ourselves or our love enough to know this. It has taken me a long time to believe in the power of simply saying, "I'm so sorry," when someone is in pain, and meaning it. One of my patients told me that when she tried to tell her story, people often interrupted to tell her that they once had something just like that happen to them. Suddenly, her pain became a story about themselves. Eventually, she stopped talking to most people. It was just too lonely. We connect through listening. When we interrupt what someone is saying to let them know that we understand, we move the focus of attention to ourselves. When we listen, they know we care. Many people with cancer talk about the relief of having someone just listen. The simple thing has not been easy to learn. It certainly went against everything I had been taught since I was very young. I thought people listened only because they were too timid to speak or didn't know the answer. A loving silence often has far more power to heal and to connect than the most well-intentioned words.
Good morning, guys. So, pop quiz. Anybody know the seventh principle? Anybody know seven? Shout it out. Yeah. Huh? That's correct. It is the respect for the interdependent web for which we all are a part. So we are all going to learn a song that I think beautifully encapsulates that. You're going to be fine. Don't stress out. I know some of y'all are already worried. Don't be. So the lyrics to the song are like, we have to lift each other up, and if we don't, I will fall down. Like if I don't lift up my friend or my neighbor, I'm the one who's going to fall down, you know? So this is how it goes. I'm gonna teach this to you, so just follow me. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. Your turn, go. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. Your turn. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. If I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, I will fall down. Do that. If I don't lift her up, that's one. If I don't lift her up, that's two. If I don't lift her up, I will fall down. There you go. Let's do that whole thing. Ready? I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. If I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, I will fall down. Good. Now we're gonna do my brother. He goes by he pronouns. I'm gonna lift my brother up. He is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up. He is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up. He is not heavy. If I don't lift him up, what'll happen? If I don't lift him up, I can do it. If I don't lift him up, I will fall down. I've got a neighbor. They go by they. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. If I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, I will fall down. My people, they are a plural they. I'm gonna lift my people up. they are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. If I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. If I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, they will fall down. Let's do our sister one more time. You can, people that harmonize like on the fly, go ahead. You're not gonna mess up the person around you, it'll be fine. And if you wanna clap, you can. If you wanna smile and turn to your friend, that's fine too. Our sister, I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. If I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, I will fall down. Good job, guys.
I don't know, you haven't met my sister yet. I got 3 of them. So, listening as a spiritual practice. Probably one of the most difficult spiritual practices there are. Oh, can't hear me, okay. Listening's really hard when you can't hear me. Okay, is that better? Okay. So Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person. You can call it compassionate listening. So, do you remember a time in your life? Think of a time in your life when you really needed someone to listen to you. When you really wanted someone just to listen. Think of that time in your life. Did you find that person? Or did you find a person who listened a little bit and then wanted to tell you their story about what had happened to them? Which happens a lot. And I have to say I'm guilty of it myself. We all are. Because when someone tells us something and it strikes a chord, we want to say, oh yeah, that happened to me. Let me tell you about it. But it's very hard. And I find this spiritual practice very hard to shut that down and to just listen. And when the time comes when they ask you, and did this ever happen to you? Then you can tell your story, right? So when you find that person with that open heart, you have found a treasure. Being heard from a person who listens without judgment, without telling their own story, without their own agenda, that can be transformative to us. It feels like they're lifting us up, right? Because they are listening to us. So a person who gave me this gift was my grandmother. And this was at a time in her life, at the end of her life, the last 10 years of her life, I was lucky enough to go live in the same city where she lived. And I had always been afar, so I'd only seen her once a year at family things. So I didn't feel like I knew her very well. And this is a time in my life when I was a young mother and full-time work, full-time mothering, full-time in a marriage, all of that, really a difficult, stressful time of my life. And yet, I went to see my grandmother every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And I did it because she knew how to listen. I think there's something about being a grandmother, now that I am one, that allows us to take a step back. We are not in charge of this young being, and we can take a step back. And my grandmother was able to do that. She listened to me without judgment. I had lots of things going on that were complicated, a marriage that was difficult, a job that was stressful, kids that were, of course, a lot to handle. And yet, she, who had been through all of this before, instead of stopping and telling me her story, which, there were times when she did tell me that, but the time when I really needed it, she just listened. So later on, when things got really bad, I had a day in which I was driving down the street, and all of a sudden I felt this huge pressure on my chest, and I just think, oh, I'm having a heart attack. Oh my God, I went to the emergency room immediately. And, they did all the tests, the EKG and all that thing, and pretty soon, after waiting a long, long time, they came back to me, and the doctor said, what's going on in your life? And I said, oh my God, there's nothing wrong with me. At that point, I really hoped there was something wrong with me because I really didn't want to be that person who was just having a panic attack. And that's what it was, of course, a panic attack. And that shows you how much stress can affect you when you don't get it out, when you don't find someone to listen. So I said, yep, you're right. Got lots going on in my life. This is obviously a panic attack. And I went right to see my grandmother and told her all about the things that I had left out of the things that I had been telling her. And she just listened, and I just cried and let it all out. And that was a deeply transformative time for me to have that person in my life. And I hope you have a person like that in your life. Adam McHugh says, we need to learn how to listen because of all the talking in the world will not make our relationships what we want them to be. And it will not make us into the sort of people we want to be. Our longings for intimacy will not be satisfied through a one-way conversation and interactions that feel like competition. You know, I think this is very true in some settings, especially in work settings. We face not true conversations, but a one-upmanship. Well, oh, you're doing that? Well, let me tell you about what I'm doing, which is even better. So a lot of competition in some of those work relationships. But learning how to listen, even in a work setting, is really a gift because people at work want to be listened to just as much as anybody else. So learning how to listen, I think, is learning how to love. And it doesn't come easy. Because I think early in my marriage, I wasn't good at that either. I did not know how to listen to my husband. I wanted him to listen to me, but as soon as I started telling my story, I felt like he had a solution. Yeah, I'd tell him about problems at work. Oh, let me tell you about it. What happened at work? And right away, he said, oh, well, I know what you should do. Well, you should try this. And yeah, okay. But I wasn't looking for a solution. I was looking for someone to listen. And I'm sure I did the same thing to others as well. I mean, it's a natural thing that we do. We want to help. We want to give advice, right? So McHugh says that listening is a practice of focused attention. He says hearing is an act of, just hearing is just the act of the senses, but listening is an act of the heart. We choose to listen. We listen with an intention to fix someone sometimes, or to judge them, what they're saying, or sometimes to keep our power in a relationship. But listening with an open heart, a non-judgmental heart, an open mind, sometimes we feel like we're giving our power away when we do that. So good listening shifts any power dynamic on its head, McHugh says. If we're really listening and we're not trying to grab power, then we shift the power dynamic. A good listener becomes someone we want on our side. That person can be trusted if they prove that listening is not tied to some personal agenda that they have. So when our friend or our partner really listens deeply to what we're saying, we begin to feel differently in that relationship. When we see in their eyes not judgment, but caring, then our hearts tend to sort of open up. We become softer and more open to what they have to say. And when we tell someone, when we're listening to someone and we respond by reflecting back what they're saying, not in a stiff therapist way like, you know, oh, I know what you're feeling, but in an open-hearted way that shows in our body language that we're open, shows in our stance, in our face that we're open, then that shifts what's happening in our dynamic with that person. This kind of listening is life-changing. It's also reflected in our principles. You know, we still have our principles. Even though we're talking about changing them, we will always go back to some of this language that we love. And this principle, acceptance of one another. Acceptance of one another. And encouragement towards spiritual growth. I love that they go together, right? If I'm accepting you and listening to you, in a way, I'm encouraging you to go out and do what you need to do in your own spiritual life. That acceptance is a spiritual thing. Now, we do this a lot here at First UU. A lot of our small groups are really good at this. What about check-in? Anybody remember check-in? Why do we have check-in anyway? It's not because we want to tell people about, I mean, of course, we're going to tell people about the great trip I just went on to Montreal. Of course I'm going to tell you that. But in a real check-in, if it's a group that's really listening, I might tell you about something that happened on that trip that wasn't so great. or something that was wonderful and opened my heart. So check-in is a time, I know we don't have that much time with check-in, but if you can use check-in to really listen to what the other people in your group are saying and to really tell them something significant that's going on in your life. It might change things if we use check-in that way, right? So another place where you can get deep listening is, of course, with our lay pastoral care associates. You knew I was going to put that in there, right? So our lay pastoral care associate, if you haven't heard, is a program we have here at First where people are trained to do this deep listening. And it's a wonderful program. And if you're going through a time in your life when, just like I did, I told you about, where things weren't going so great, and you just need someone to listen, then see one of us, and we can assign you to one of our lay pastoral care associates. There's another way that you can provide listening for others that it may not sound like listening, but it really is. And that is a program that's run by our Church of the Larger Fellowship. It's called our Worthy Now Prison Fellowship. And it's a pen pal program for prisoners in prisons. And these are people who have heard about Unitarian Universalism, and they've learned about it by becoming a member of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. That's a church that serves people who are not in churches, in physical churches, who need to find fellowship in a church. So our denomination has created this prison fellowship so that some of us can reach out and be in conversation and listening to people who are in prison. I've got a wonderful guy that I'm talking to who's in a federal prison in Texas. And, while, I tell him a little bit about myself, mostly I listen in his letters he sends to me about what's going on with him. And I think it gives him a feeling of acceptance, just complete acceptance, which is what we're so good at, right? The inherent worth and dignity of each person. So that's one way you can listen. Another plug. So in this time of polarization, it's really hard to listen, especially in our family sometimes, right? Maybe a time when we need to learn to listen even more than we want to, with people with whom we disagree. And many of you shared that you can't talk politics in your family, and I understand that. Good idea. Don't talk about politics or religion. It's probably a good idea. But a family get-together may also be a time to learn more about that person's story, which may help you to understand more about why they are where they are, if you hear their story and really listen to it. Benjamin Mathis says, when someone has a point of view that we find difficult to understand or disagreeable or even offensive, we must look to the set of circumstances that person has experienced that resulted in that point of view and get their story, their biography, and maybe you'll open up to a real possibility of understanding them. He suggests that when we ask, what is your story? I'd love to know how you came to this point of view. And then we listen without having to tell them our story, that we might just change things in that relationship. I read a story about someone who totally changed her worldview from someone in the opposite political camp really listening to her. Morgan Phelps Roper was a granddaughter of the man who founded the Westboro Baptist Church. And she grew up picketing, as we've seen, the Westboro Baptist Church, picketing all the liberal causes, all of our LGBT friends getting, terrible, offensive responses from them. That's how she grew up. She was the granddaughter of the person who founded this church. And she had actually been taught that was her job, to show these people that God hated them. That was she thought was her job was. And so her job in this organization was to do social media, because of course she was a young one and she knew how to do Twitter and that kind of thing. So she was in charge of the Twitter account. And she'd get all of this liberal people responding, some angrily, of course. And then she started getting people who were not angry, and people were just asking her, we want to know more about why you feel the way you do. People who were asking and listening to her responses. And I don't know how you do that on Twitter, but I assume they had other means to listen to her. But she says it was the compassionate outreach coming from these Twitter followers who made her feel heard. She began to question everything she'd been taught. She left her family with her younger sister a few months later, and she has now written a book called Unfollow. I think of those people who reached out to her and offered to hear her story, they were brave, and they had a spiritual practice of listening, asking what had led her to beliefs, and compassionately hearing her story and gently pointing out some inconsistencies in her story. But it made a big difference. In the Hebrew Testament, the Lord asked King Solomon what he wished for. Solomon, whom we know as a wise man, answered that he wished for what is usually translated as an understanding heart. But in Hebrew, it's literally translated as a listening heart. Learning how to listen is learning how to love. Learning how to truly be open and have a listening heart changes our lives and those around us. The world needs our listening. Please stand as we sing our closing hymn, Love Knocks and Waits for Us to Hear. No, we're not going to do that? Okay. First, we're going to do our chalice extinguishing. Still trying to get used to your order of service.
These are words by Mary Weiss from Prayer for Weary Times. As we extinguish this chalice, let us remember that ours is not a solitary journey, but one taken together, bolstered by deep listening and deeply rooted in love. May we find the strength needed for the journey here, in this place, and in all places where people gather for love, for humanity, and for justice.
Now you can please stand as we say our benediction, and may our listening become a prayer to gather the wisdom from this beloved community. Now let us sing our closing hymn, Love Knocks and Waits for Us to Hear.